Welcome back to English 101 College Composition at SUNY GCC. This is Module 7, the writing process, focusing on revising and proofreading with Professor Melissa Siska. This presentation is done in cooperation with content from Lumen Learning. The writing process, revising and proofreading. Learning outcomes for this module, you will be able to describe the basic purpose and structure of argumentative essays, as well as recognize an argumentative thesis. We are in the orange circle of our recursive writing process. The orange circle is for revise. In the revising step, we receive a line structure and a line theses. Revising. Struck and White said, "Few writers are so expert that they can produce what they are after on the first try. Quite often you will discover on examining the completed work that there are serious flaws in the arrangement of the material, calling for transpositions. Do not be afraid to experiment with your text." Think of writing like creating a work of art. To produce a polished product, you'd create the initial piece and then revisit it to make adjustments and improvements, probably multiple times. Working on your draft. Revising your draft. Revision is the step of the process in which you focus on your ideas and organization and rearrange or fine-tune your draft. Revision allows drafting and precedes editing. It follows drafting and precedes editing, which is a focus more on the grammar and readability of your draft, and proofreading, which is the final check for surface errors. Revising stage 1 is seeing the big picture, revising stage 2 is the mid-view, and revising stage 3 is editing up close. Working with peers in editing can be a huge benefit to the writer. We like to employ the CARES model for working with peers on editing and revising. CARES stands for the following. C, congratulate. What does the writer do well in this assignment? List one or more aspects. Also, please write the writer's main claim or focus, their thesis, according to what you have read and the thesis you recognize. It may not necessarily be the last sentence of their first paragraph, which, as we know, is the most traditional place for the thesis. This is important because sometimes what the author believes their thesis in is not actually what it turns out to be if they don't stay true to it throughout the paper. A is for ask clarifying questions. What parts of the essay were a bit confusing to you? Why? What specific suggestions, 3 or fewer, do you have for revising the unclear parts of this writing? Sometimes they don't understand why it's unclear because they have enough background knowledge that it's clear in their own mind. And so making specific suggestions may help them figure out in which ways to better clarify their writing. R is for request more. What would you like to know more about the topic that can enhance the essay and that supports the thesis? What else can they give you of interest to help build up this topic or help support their argument? E is for evaluate its value. What specific detail or details do not work with the essay? Or, for example, don't support the thesis, or that can be removed within the essay? Did the author go off on a tangent? Is there too much extraneous information that pulls away from the main point? This is where you would mark down that information. And S is for summarize. Overall, what new information have you learned, or how are you thinking differently after reading this? This is important because as an author, you should have an idea of what you want your reader to come away with. And so when you peer review, your peer can tell you what they came away with, and then you'll have a better idea if you're accomplishing your point and if you need to change things. Okay, practice question. Please open up a Word document to begin your lecture response. And your first question in the lecture response is, briefly summarize for me, what does the acronym CARES stand for and how does it help you as a reader? Go ahead and pause the video and fill in that information. Next is revising for content and structure. Learning outcomes for this section of the module. You'll be able to examine the elements of an argument. You'll be able to differentiate between deductive and inductive reasoning, to evaluate logical structures and arguments, to recognize appeals to logos, to use the STAR method to evaluate appeals to logos, to recognize appeals to pathos, recognize appeals to ethos, to differentiate between types of rhetorical appeals, to describe logical fallacies, to differentiate between types of logical fallacies, to evaluate logical fallacies in texts, to describe strategies for effective refutation and rebuttal, to evaluate strategies for rebuttal and refutation of counterarguments, and to examine methods of organizing an argument such as Tolman's schema. Revising for rhetorical context. Background knowledge. In general, you don't want to merely repeat what your audience already knows about the topic you're writing on. You want to build on it. So you want to give a little background knowledge and then use that as your jumping off point. Expectations and interest. Your audience may expect to find specific points or writing approaches, especially if you are writing for a teacher or a boss. Be sure you address those. Attitudes and biases. Your audience may have predetermined feelings about you or your topic, which can affect how hard you have to work to win them over or appeal to them. And demographics. Consider what else you know about your audience, such as their age, gender, ethnicity, and cultural backgrounds, political preferences, religious affiliations, job or professional background, and area of residence. Be sure you're taking all these things into consideration when you are revising for your specific rhetorical context. Revising for style. Revising your draft. Revision is the step of the writing process in which you focus your ideas and organization and rearrange or fine-tune your draft. Revision follows drafting and precedes editing, which is a focus more on the grammar and readability of your draft, and your proofreading, which again is a final check for surface errors. When revising your work, you may rearrange paragraphs and sentences. You may change your wording to make the arguments more clear, or you may add or remove information. Revising your draft. As I mentioned before, there are 3 stages to revising your draft. Revising stage 1 is seeing the big picture. When you first begin your revision process, you should focus on the big picture or issues at the essay level that might need to be addressed. Then for stage 2, we're going to look at the mid-view. In the second stage of the revision process requires that you look at your content closely and at the paragraph level. It's now time to examine each paragraph on its own to see where you might need to revise. You're not concerned with how the paragraphs fit together at this point, simply how each paragraph reads on its own. And then stage 3 is the editing up close. Once you've completed your revision and feel confident in your content, you want to begin in the editing stage of your revision and editing process, which we'll elaborate on later. Working with peers. Being a good peer reviewer. The insights you can gain from having someone else read your paper can make you aware of any shortcomings or weaknesses in your paper. You want to review the criteria for the paper, look at the organization, look at the way it is focused and the style in which it is written, look at how the ideas are developed throughout the paper and the conventions used within it. Remember to consider the audience. When analyzing your audience, consider these points. Doing this should make it easier to create a profile for your audience, which can help guide your writing choices. Pay attention to their background knowledge, as you don't want to merely repeat what they already know. You want to be able to use an established common quantity of background knowledge from your audience to use that as your jumping off point. Expectations and interest. You want to find specific points or writing approaches equivalent to the expectations and the interests of your focused reader. Attitudes and biases can affect how hard you have to work to win over your appeal. Again, keep these in mind so you're not over-arguing when you have an audience that will easily be won over by you and you're arguing hard enough, when you have an audience that will overwhelmingly disagree with you in the beginning. Demographics. Consider what else you know about your audience, such as their age, gender, ethnic and cultural backgrounds, political preferences, religious affiliations, jobs and professional backgrounds, and area of residence. Again, use these things to your advantage when making your arguments and presenting your points. Revising for style. Academic style. So formal academic writing is concise and precise. The writer weeds out unnecessary words and choices. The exact word to convey the meaning is often chosen. Follow these principles to be sure that your word choice is appropriate to an academic writing task. Use a formal tone. Avoid slang. Find alternatives to lit, salty, low-key, or any other contemporary terminology. Write about men and women rather than girls and guys, unless you're trying to create a specific effect. A formal tone calls for formal language. Avoid cliches. Overused expressions such as outside the box, back in the day, feeling blue, and similar expressions are empty of meaning as they're so overused and may not appeal to your audience, or they may skim right over them and not even notice them. Use specific words rather than overly general words. Find synonyms for vague words like thing, people, nice, good, bad, interesting, etc. Or use specific details to make your exact meaning clear. All right, this is going to be the second part of your lecture response. You're gonna have to pause the video to do this effectively. It's gonna take you probably 5 to 10 minutes. You're gonna add this to your lecture response as number 2. Spend some time trying to find checklists for revising essays. Be sure to copy the URLs from the web pages that you found and paste them in with your response to this. You should have 2 to 3. Then answer these questions. Are there similarities or differences to what the reading suggests, that's the reading you did in the study plan, that are common practices for revising? What do these checklists have you look for? And what do you think are the most important suggestions? Now, don't kill yourself answering these. Please get 2 to 3 different revising checklists for essays that you find on the internet. Paste the URLs in, and then compare and contrast them answering these questions. You can use bullet points. You do not need complete sentences. Please be sure you spend 10 minutes or less on this activity, but it should take you at least 5 minutes. Revising for structure. There are a few strategies to help you revise your essay structure globally. That is, strategies that help you consider the overall organization of the essay. Write stronger introductions, both for the whole document and the major sections. Look for a stronger thesis in the conclusion of the essay draft. Consider audience receptiveness. Cut up your essay and look at the pieces, and create a reverse outline. Revising claims. When you support your thesis, you're revealing evidence. Evidence includes anything that can help support your stance. You should revisit your evidence as you revise to ensure that it appropriately supports the claims in your writing. Facts. Facts are the best kind of evidence you can use because they cannot be disputed. They can support your stance by providing background information or a solid foundation for your point of view. Judgments. Judgments are conclusions drawn from the given facts. Testimony consists of direct quotations from either an eyewitness or an expert witness. And personal observation. It's similar to testimony, but personal observation is your testimony, you being the author. Revising your paragraphs. When looking at each individual paragraph, be sure to look for the logic and structure, the rank order to be sure things are ordered properly, how it looks spatially, chronologically, keep things again in order from rank or chronological perspective, and that you're moving from general to specific for the ease of your reader. Revising paragraph structure. Since paragraph structure essentially punctuates an essay or other piece of writing, if your paragraphs do not make sense or don't fit together in a way that makes sense, your reader is going to have a hard time following your message. Editing and proofreading. For this section, the learning outcomes are that you will be able to describe techniques for reading and editing, be able to edit for common grammatical errors, to edit for common punctuation errors, and to describe proofreading and how to do it. Editing. Reading for editing. Read aloud word for word. Slow down to about 25% of your normal speed. This will force you to see errors you would normally just skim over and your brain would autocorrect. Read from the end. That is, read backwards, sentence by sentence. Does each individual sentence make sense? Is it grammatically correct on its own? Sometimes when we read things in order, our brain gets into the flow and we miss things that when we look chopped up from the back, we notice. Check for consistency and accuracy. Make sure your point of view, your tone, and your style are consistent throughout. Check for the accuracy of your quotes, evidence, and other items within your text. Read for formality. Check that you have chosen formal language, and if not, make the corrections. Check your reference list. Be sure every source you used is on your reference list, and make sure every reference on your list has been used somewhere in your essay. And use grammatical tools such as spell check and Grammarly. They can help you find things that you missed. Please do this last because it is not an end-all be-all and it misses a lot, but it will sometimes catch things that you missed. So please don't just use spell check and Grammarly and assume your editing is completed. You also need to edit for grammatical errors. Within each sentence, please make sure that the subject and verb agree. Make sure your pronoun is referenced properly. Your verb tense is correct. You have a full sentence structure, meaning there are no run-ons and no fragments. Check for apostrophe errors. Check for commonly confused terms, such as there, and there. And make sure that you have a consistent active or passive voice. Keep your voice consistent. If you have questions about these grammatical errors, go back to our grammar unit and review your rules from there. Approaching precision proofreading. What proofreading entails. So proofreading involves checking for grammatical, spelling, and mechanical errors, which may include problems with verb tense, subject-verb agreement, parallel structure, sentence completion, alternate spellings, capitalization, and punctuation. Proofreading is often made easier by the use of colored ink, bracketed or parenthetical notations, or proofreading symbols for identification and correction. All right, pull out that lecture response one last time. And in your own words, tell me, why are the revising, editing, and proofreading steps important to the process of creating your final draft of a written piece? After you've completed that, unpause the video and we'll finish up. Here's our quick review. Content. Does the content of this project fulfill the purpose of the assignment? Will the audience be persuaded by the ideas and evidence? And what strategies could I use to improve my content? Structure. Is the organization of the project appropriate for the purpose of the assignment? Will the audience find the project well organized and logical? What strategies might you use to improve your structure? Style. Does the style of the project align with the purpose of the assignment? If not, you have a problem. Will the audience recognize the style as appropriate and effective? What strategies might you use to improve or correct the style? Grammar and mechanics. Will readers be hindered and irritated by errors in your grammar and mechanics? I hope not. Will errors in grammar and mechanics damage your ethos as a writer? What strategies might you use to edit and proofread the project? Be sure you can answer these questions. Going through the steps of revising and editing and proofreading should help solve all of these problems if you keep in mind the items we reviewed today. that is it. Now, please save and submit your lecture response in week 12. And let me know if you have any questions.